And let me share my screen. And does everybody see this? Are we all good to go? All right, so let's start with some definitions, and these are important. These will be you will get a database user manual, and we're close to finishing that up. And all of this stuff will be in there. We will also post all the slides from today on the website so that you can get them if you need to go through them again, but almost all of this is in the manual as well. But there's some definitions, and the reason we have these definitions because it helps the programmers when they go to set up reports for you to run. And we're not going to go through reports today because they're not ready yet. We'll do another training later in September or October on how to run reports. But we're going to try to make sure that you have the reports necessary to help you find students that you have maybe lost or don't seem to have data that they need to have in them, or able to look at your metrics at your institution. So again, completion is defined as a student who goes through the course. If it's a credit course, they earn a C or better. If it's a non-credit course, they participate at least 75% of the time in the course. Somebody could be incomplete. We're going to give you access to a web page, a URL that goes to a web page that you can turn into, and we'll give you a copy of a QR code if you would like, that you can give to your students the first day of class, and they can self-register into the database, and they can put some of their information in. They will put some of their information in, but they won't put all of their information in. And that information will be put in either by the coach or the database entry person after you've met with the student. And so we will have a category of students called incomplete. And those will be students that will have some data in the database, but not anything beyond sort of what they would have input in on either that form or on the website, okay? So those are called incomplete, and you'll be able to run a report to find those to make sure that you can go back and capture them. Somehow they got missed. Students that are enrolled in the course and have some type of profile data. In other words, they went in and they did a self-register and some type of student data. And we'll talk about that in a minute. A non-completer is someone who enrolled in the course but does not complete the course. For a credit course, less than a C. For a non-credit course, less than 75% participation. These students may have had coaching, but they didn't successfully complete the course. Completers are those who enroll in the course, they earn the grade of a C or better, or they complete 75 to 100% for non-credit, but they had less than 2 coaching sessions. And so the difference between a completer and full participant is that number of coaching sessions. And in your contract, you have the requirement of meeting for the year 40 full participants. So the difference between the two is the number of coaching sessions. So somebody may have completed, but you didn't get in and coach them a second time. And you'll be able to run a report and go look for those students and go, oh, well, wait, we need to go back and have a final coaching session with that student and put some data in so that we do capture them as a full participant. And again, we'll have reports for you to be able to go find those students. Start date and end date. This is not as important for you, all of you, because you're all doing credit courses. It's important for the non-credit folks, but the start date and the end date is considered either the first coaching, the start date is either the first coaching session or the first day of class, and the end date is either the last day of coaching or the last day of class. And the database automatically calculates it. Now, because you're all doing semester courses, it's not important for you. This is more important for folks that are doing non-credit shorter courses. But you will see that in the database that there'll be a place for start date and end date, and it won't populate until some data is input into the database. And you'll see that in a moment. These two definitions are not important for you. These are for the non-credit folks. What does it mean for a workforce training certificate and an industry recognized credential? Again, those are being offered through the non-credit programs, so not of importance for you. Is everybody okay so far? Okay, Crystal, use of data.
Okay, thanks, Darlene. So thanks to all of you who have already completed and returned your signed FERPA contract to me. I appreciate that. Just so everyone knows, before you'll get access to the database, we need to have a signed FERPA agreement from you. Anybody who is seeing student data or entering student data, so coaches, faculties, the program administrator for the Money Smart program, any data entry people have to complete a FERPA confidentiality contract. And I think I have most of y'all. I don't think I have anything. I don't think I have one for Favor or Jaime. And I don't think I had Karen Williams either. So if I could ask each of you to please put your contact information, your email address in the chat box, I can get you a FERPA form so that you'll be able to get access to the database. So part of the information that is input into the database includes the student's name, their email address, and their phone number. All of this is routine directory data and routine directory information that is not considered personally identifiable information. And that information is important for a number of reasons. First and foremost, for the coaches to be able to get a hold of the students, either by email or phone number, but also at some point in the program, our evaluator looks at students to see how they are persisting and being retained at your college. And so our past grant, we showed great improvement in persistence and completion for students who were in the Money Smart program. We hope to be able to show that again. And so our evaluators need this information to go back and make that connection. So just so you know, and you can assure your students that this information is never reported or made public. Next slide. Other information that we collect in the database includes the demographic information that you see on the screen. But again, if students do not wish to provide that information, there's a category for each of those demographic data points for the student to say that they don't wish to answer or they prefer not to disclose the information. So this information that we collect, it's for reporting purposes only. To JP Morgan Chase, they like to gather the demographic information on students that they're serving, but it is only reported in the aggregate. So no individual student data is ever reported to anyone. And JP Morgan Chase is important for them because they keep track of all the people that they serve, students or otherwise, and they report it in a report that they call their communities that they serve. But this information, including the directory data, is never released to the funder or even to our into the evaluators. So, and if when it is reported, it is again only in the aggregate. So I thank you to those of you who have submitted your forms, and I'll get the others out to those that have not yet submitted.
So I'm going to go through some basic functionality. It will make more sense to you when you see the database, but it's always, it's good for us you to see it here and then again, go back to refer to it. And all of you will be seeing the database for the first time. Yesterday we did training with the non-credit folks, and many of them had been in the first project and seen it before, and some of it has changed. So let's start with this idea of student type. So student type is the type of student. Are they a credit student or a non-credit student? Okay. This is a new category in the database past from the old project, and that we need to be able to differentiate between the non-credit and the credit students. And it's really important that when the data gets input, that the right type of student type is chosen. And you'll see buttons on the website such as this. So student type would take you to that student's type page with their course information in it. The person profile will take you to their profile page. You can then view the profile page, or you can go back to the person list, and that'll make sense when we open up the database. But you're going to see buttons like this throughout the database, which allows you to go from screen to screen without having to go back and do some type of search function. As a coach or an administrator, when you open it up, the first screen you're going to see looks like this. At the top, it's going to say reports and students. It's going to have your email address logged in. It's going to have a button for you to add a person. It's going to have a search functionality. And then this is important because it shows the first name, the last name, the role, who's assigned, the type of coach in the college, and again, this series of buttons to work with. You will be able to see at your college, if you're a coach, a non-coach, or an admin, you'll be able to see the students at your college only, okay? And you'll see them in this list. And you'll be able to see them by semester, um, and be able to do some search functions. So again, we've got these buttons that are throughout the database. And again, it makes it easier for you to go from page to page. You're working in the student profile, you've saved the student profile, now you want to go look at their student type, make sure their student type is correct. You're going to be able to go back and forth. And then you can always go back to that list, which takes you back to that master list so that you can go look for other students. You can do searches in the database. You can search by student name, search by credit or non-credit. Last semester, CCNY did both credit and non-credit, so they could go search for their credit students versus their non-credit students. Although Callie and Jennifer don't do that because we haven't put your non-credit students in. You can search by term and by records per page. The default is 10, but you can search and list as many as 100 students per page to do that. They work independently or they can work all together, okay, for your search functions. There are required fields and metric fields in the database. If it's a required field, there's a red asterisk next to it, and they are required fields. You cannot save a page when you're inputting data without completing the field. If you try to save it, you're going to get an error message and you're going to have to go back and fix it. I mean, you've all done this. You've all seen this on web pages before. Some fields give you the option to complete later. They say something similar to data not collected yet. Okay, these are particularly important in the student type fields. When we look at the student type page, when we go live into the database, it'll make sense to you because the first time you put a student in, the student will not have completed the course. So in order to save that page, you would choose the not completed yet, and then have to go back and put that data in later. There are reports for that. So there are reports for you to run throughout the semester and at the end of the semester so that you can go back and check to make sure all the data is complete. All the financial profile fields that are aligned with a metric are highlighted in red. And you'll see that when we get into the financial profile field. You'll see everything that's associated with a metric is in red font. So this reminds you that this is something that the evaluator looks at when they're looking at through the data in the database. On the financial pages, there's an edit button, which will no longer be called an edit button. It will be called the correct error button. And the reason we did that was because the old users of the database were used to using it in a different way. And so that's going to be called, this button right here will say correct error. And it should only be used for correcting errors in data entry. It should never be used to make an incremental change. Like if a student came in on the first day and they had $100 in savings, and they came in the second day and they had 120, you should never correct this to 120. You should put in another record, and we'll show you that when we get into the financial page. So this should only be used for error purposes, okay? And that'll make more sense when you see it. You will see on the financial page is an update button. And we will explain this when we show you the financial page because the upper half of the financial page is separate from the lower half in terms of how you can update and change data. And so if you come up here and you say, oh, wait, yeah, the student's no longer employed, I need to make that a no, you would check a no and choose update. So it's a different button. It's the only place you see it is on the financial page. And again, it's because the way the software was programmed, the upper half of the financial page is separate from the lower half in terms of how to edit, okay? And it'll make more sense when we show it to you. All right, so when and how to input data. So there are 4 phases for inputting the data, okay? The following people can input data: the college financial coach, the data entry person, the faculty. The admin is set up to only run reports, okay? And again, you can't have access to the database until we get your FERPA contract. because we want to make sure that we're following all the rules of confidentiality for the students as well as for the project. So the coach, the data entry person, and the faculty can input data. Okay. The admin runs reports. Unless the admin asks for access to put in data. If they do, they need the right to do, then we will give you the access to do that. But for right now, that's the way everybody is set up. So the 4 phases are first, the student profile, and we'll go through this in a second, but the student profile data should only be input after the student is registered and enrolled in the course. Ideally, it's the first day of class. Ideally, the faculty member would give the students either the QR code or the URL. The students could go right into their phone and they could input their data into the database and input themselves. But there are 3 fields that are not input on the form or on the QR code, and that's the student type, the family student income, and the assigned coach. And these are all things that need to be put in after the student self-registers. Probably a meeting sitting down with the coach, or it could be put in by the data entry person who goes in and puts this information in later. Faculty member says, oh, okay, here's my roster of students, and here's who's going to coach these students. The data entry person could go in and put that in. But again, this is put in at a later date once the student self-registers. The student type data is next. This could be put in by the faculty, this could be put in by the coach, this could be put in by the data entry person, but it's the putting the student in to the type of student that they are. So if they're a credit student, they go into a credit type. If they're a non-credit student, they go into a non-credit field. And each of them, you put in the class name, the number of hours, how the class is being taught, the start and end date. And ideally, the idea is to put that in the first week of class so that the students are now in the database, and then the coaches and anybody else can now start inputting data into the database as you're going along through the semester. So that's the second phase. The third phase is really when the coach starts meeting with the student. And the coach then can start putting financial data into the database as the semester goes on, and as they meet with the students. Now, we did set it up so that you could put some financial data in after a class assignment. Ideally, and again, I'm not going to tell faculty how to teach their courses, but ideally, we would like it if you were able to get a credit score on all the students in the first week of class, because the credit score is so important for so many of the metrics. Now, you may say, I don't address credit scores until week 4, and we're not going to put it in until then, and I'm okay with that. But ideally, you could collect a credit score from all of the students, have them run their credit score, have everybody go to Credit Karma or Rocket or somewhere else and get a credit score, and then it could be put in by the data entry person, or anybody could put it in the database. It could be input during a coaching session, because there's a lot of things that can be input during a coaching session when you're collecting financial data. It's important that you remember the metrics. The metrics are, completing a budget, achieving a financial goal, increasing savings, reducing debt if a student has debt, and trying to increase their credit score if they have a credit score. So it's important you remember those. And remember that full participation means 2 coaching sessions. So every student should have at least 2 coaching sessions. Okay, and then the 4th phase is after the course is over with. Course is ended, faculty has assigned the grades. The faculty could put the grades in, the data entry person could put the grades in, the coach could put the grades in, but that's the last piece of data. Now, as I said earlier, if you do all of this and then you find a student that was enrolled but never had 2 coaching sessions, you could call that student back and do a remote coaching session with that student or an in-person and go back and put that data in for that student afterwards, after the completion of the course, so that you would get your 2 coaching sessions for every student. Okay, but ideally the data, the last phase is when the grade is input and the fact that the student completed the course or didn't complete the course. Okay, so there is a QR code that you can utilize. You can give the students, they can, use their phones and then go in and enter on their phones their data and enter their data on the phone, or you can give them the URL, or you can use that form that we used last semester, and they can input this data, and they self-register. Okay. Again, the fields that are in red are required, so their name, their email, their phone number. And then it does start to ask some demographics data. This has got to get fixed right here. This is a required field. This is just like you saw in those forums last time. It's that age range, 14 to 17 is a teen, 18 to 24 adult, young adult, 25 to 64 adult, and then 65 over as a senior. All of these fields, all of these demographic fields, the student can say, I do not wish to answer, I prefer not to disclose. That is their right. We honor that. We would never force a student to identify anything they don't feel comfortable identifying. Again, this is just JP Morgan Chase uses this data. They have to, as a bank and a financial institution, they have to report to the government every so many years on community served, and it's part of their community served report. But again, students don't have to identify. If they don't want to identify, that's perfectly okay. If they choose to identify, that's great as well. And then the last page on that, this will no longer say vulnerable population. This will say other identity. Vulnerable population is a term that JP Morgan Chase uses. So we're going to change this so that it doesn't look so vulnerable. And if a student does not choose to disclose any of this information, they don't need to. The last thing they do is check and say they're not a robot, and they register. Okay. They get a response, a page that says, thanks for registering, and that your coach will be in contact with you shortly. They also get an email that says, thanks for registering, your coach will be in touch with you shortly. Okay. So it knows that they're registered. So that they know that they're going to have a contact with somebody other than their faculty member at their institution. And that next person is going to be the coach. Okay. I want to go back here just for a second, right here, and note that we made sure that this is on this page, this web page, it's on the form, that we tell the students this data is confidential, their name is encrypted in the database, it's never made public, it's demographic data for reporting purposes only, and it's never reported personally, and it's kept confidential. And that's again why it's important by everybody signing that FERPA form. So some of you used the student profile fillable form last semester. It's still on the website if you want to do it that way. It's a way for students to fill it out. Does the coach get a notice? Sydney, yes, you do. Whoever the college has determined should get the email. Thank you for that. Good question, Sydney. I got to add that to the slide. Great question. Yes. Whoever the college assigns as who should get the email response, they will get the response that tells them that the student is registered. Okay. And each college will be different, and you'll work with your technical assistants, person from MSFCP or Crystal, to say this is who we want to get the email telling them that the student has registered. Okay, great question. You can use that form again. That form is a Word form. You could give it to the student in a Word form. They could fill it out. They could email it to their coach. They could email it to the data entry person. If you want to do it that way, we found that the students, they use their phone for everything, that it's just as easy to do that. But you could use that form if you chose to. And then the third way would be for the coach to input it while sitting with the student. But if you noticed on that QR code or that URL and on that form, there were three things missing: the student type, the family student income, and the assigned coach. Good question, Jennifer. The QR code is live, and we will get it to you as soon as we're done with the training. So the student type assigns a student to the type of student they are in the database, either credit or non-credit. The family student income is a great place for the coach to have a conversation with their student. We've provided you a chart in the database manual as to where they fall within the student income, student family income guidelines. Again, there's a spot that says do not wish to answer, and the student does not have to divulge that. They don't have to tell you what their family income is. That if they don't feel comfortable with that, that's fine. Again, it's one of those things that JP Morgan Chase uses in their reporting when they do their report, their federal reports that are required. And the last thing that's not done is the coach is not assigned. Okay. And the coach needs to be assigned before anybody can input data into the database. So it's really important. That incomplete report that you'll get to run will tell you if you, when you run that report, people that don't have an assigned coach. Okay. So that you can go in and get them an assigned coach so that you can start putting data into the database. But if they don't have an assigned coach, they're in there, but they're an incomplete student. Okay, I am now going to go into the database and let Juliet do her thing. And I'm going to be the master of ceremonies. And okay, Juliet, go ahead. And take yourself off mute.
So this is the screen that a coach would see when they are looking at their dashboard or their student roster. And as you can see from what Darlene had mentioned, there's this two buttons up on the upper left, one for students and one for reports. Reports, we're going to talk at a different time about that. And you'll see below a list of students that this particular coach has on their student roster list. And in this case, it's, the college is York College. So you will only see, obviously, all the students, and we've allowed it so that both coaches and non-coaches, everybody can see the students in MSFCP assigned to York College. So you'll also see at the top the different semesters for each spring, fall throughout the years. And this is also a way for you to sort if you want to look at a specific semester, and then you can search by name, you can search through the student type, which in this case would be credit. So we're going to go and look at a first student that is a credit student, database training 2. And the first page we'll look at is the edit page. Now this student, let's just say this student self-registered with the QR code in class. And obviously the first things that are going to be populated are the required fields. So in this case, the first and last name, the phone, the age, and then if you scroll down, the vulnerable population would have been clicked, and also the gender identity, ethnicity, and race. So the fields that would not have been filled are specifically the student type, the family and student income, and then the assigned coach. So for purposes of this, we know the coach knows that the student type is credit. So we just click on the drop down and hit credit. And then the student and family income field is something, if this coach or the non-coach does not know, they would just click not available at this time at the bottom. And this is something that can be discussed privately when a coach meets with the student, or if the student knows what it is at the time. So we can click not available at this time.
I'm going to wait and I'm not going to click it and then show you what happens, okay?
And then assign coach, you would put down the coach's name. Now, what's interesting is when you hit, you can actually add a note too at the bottom if there's any specific information. For example, we'll find out family or student income at a future date. You could put that in as a note and then click add note. And that's a reminder to the coach that would be a piece of information to gather at a later date.
Okay, so I'm going to try and save this and note what happens because we didn't choose anything here.
Right. So as you can see, a prompt comes up that says this is a required for students, and so something has to be chosen, and then you will be able to save the data. Now, when you save this data, it's going to bring you back to person details, and then you can review everything in this particular page, and it should be pretty much filled out. The only thing is that what you want to do is make sure that the student profile is correct and that it does say credit, because that will bring you to the next page for the student profile page. And that's a very different page from the non-credit page. So then you're going to go into student type. And as you can see, it's blank. Nothing has been really filled out. So at this point, you have to go into edit student type. And again, you'll see at the top, all fields with the red asterisks are required data fields. So you see a variety of fields. You're going to choose the enrollment status, full-time or part-time. You're going to select if it's a Pell recipient. It's very possible you may not know that, so you can click I don't know. A degree or major is not mandatory, but if you happen to know it, that could be very useful information, especially from an evaluation standpoint. And then a course name is required. So every college must have a course name for the Money Smart coaching program. And then, of course, the semester that you're enrolled in the course. The course start date would also be something that is mandatory. So at this point, you'd put in when does the course start and when does the course end? And then, of course, the number of credits. The name of the faculty, and this way you can just type in a name. And then the course modality. Is it in person, online synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid, or other? And then finally, the type of course it is. Is it standalone? Is it a first-year experience, orientation, or other? Now, as you can see, the last two fields would not be fields that you could fill in at the beginning. And this will allow you to put in not yet available for both estimated percent attended by student. And this is where at the end of the course, the coach or the data entry person or the faculty can then go back into the student type and then put in the course grade as well as what percentage was attended by the student. And at this point, you're going to hit save. And now you see the detail level for the credit student type. And just, it's always good to review it to make sure that it is exactly what it's supposed to say. But now you have both the profile and the student type in the database. And you're basically ready to start with the financial profile. And at this point, you can actually click on the financial profile from this page. So this is the page that you will review when you're looking at entering profile data. And you can see 4 buttons. These are the 4 buttons that Darlene discussed in the presentation: the student type, edit person profile, view, etc. And this will allow you to toggle back and forth to different pages. But for purposes of this, we're going to now start adding data, and this is going to be probably one of the most important pages, because this is the data that will inform the metrics. So we click add new version. And again, you're going to see all fields with red are required. First question is, how was the financial data collected? Now, as was discussed, you can actually collect data either through a one-on-one coaching session or other. And in this case, we're going to pick other. And then you hit continue. Now, what do we mean by other? We mean, was this data actually something discussed in class? Was it something like, looking at the credit score at the very beginning of the course? Anything that was not discussed or data collected from a one-on-one coaching session. And the first question that pops up is, was a personal budget created, which is required for the metrics. Now, at this point, perhaps the budget was already created in class, or it could have been created as a homework assignment. It really depends. But there's a drop-down menu for this question. And if the coach or the data entry person does not know, they can just click no. They're not aware that a personal budget was created. The second question has a lot to do with helping the coach and the student work on a budget if there was one not created. And this is important because we did discover that a lot of students from our first pilot, they did not have jobs. So it was very difficult for them to even have a credit score or to show debt or savings. So again, if the person entering the data is not aware, they would obviously click I don't know. And then you hit continue.
Okay, and I'll take it from here, and then you take it, I'll do this session, and then you do the coaching session, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so as we said earlier when I was showing you the functionality, this is the only place where there's this update button. And this data carries forward from one version to the next. So if you put in information, it carries forward to the next version. So the next time somebody goes in, if they go in to do a coaching session, they'll see this same information on their page and they could update it. So say I was the data entry person and the only thing I knew was that in the first day of class or the first week of class, the faculty member had collected a credit score from everybody. And so the faculty member either goes in or the faculty member runs it to the coach or the data person and says, go put this credit score in for everybody in the database. So that's what I'm going to pretend I'm doing at this moment in time. Okay, that this is my only role is to go in and put a credit score in from everybody. Juliet will run through the rest of this when she walks through a coaching session. So there's places to put in non-wage income. This again helps a coach in terms of knowing where the student may have some income coming in terms of doing a budget. Again, savings is a required metrics, okay? So when we ask for some of these, we ask for what's the source and how it's collected, okay? Well, this is my first time through, and I don't know if this student has any savings yet. So the first thing I'm going to collect, I'm going to mark savings not started, okay? And in order to add that to the database, the most important thing that I do is put add. If I don't put in add, if I don't hit the add button, it doesn't add it. Now, the reason that we put this in here was because we had some problems last time with folks putting in data who would put in savings account and put in 0. And then when the data ran, the data was all screwed up. The student, they didn't know. But they were just putting a 0 in. So it looked like the student had no savings, and they may have. But as a data entry person, I don't know. So I'm saying savings not started, and I hit the add button. Anytime you add anything in to any of these fields on the profile page, you got to remember to hit add. So notice it comes out savings not started. Now, when Juliet goes to the next coaching session, she's going to put some data in, and she'll show you what happens when we put the data in, okay? But this just tells you, and this is another way to run a report. So you could run a report, and it could come back and say, for the following students, we show no savings. And you could go, oh, I missed that, or, oh, I should talk to the student about that, okay? So again, it's a way for you to have a conversation as a coach. All of these sections have note sections, and we want you to use them to put in notes because it helps you to remember what you discussed with the student the last time, or it helps you remember what was going on in the class, okay? Investments is not required, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Debt, again, is in red because it's required for metrics. But again, I'm the data entry person. I'm going in the first time. All I know is that the student has a credit score. So for under debt, I'm going to put no identifiable debt, and I'm going to remember to hit the add button so that we have no identifiable debt. Again, this is in here so that you can run a report and say, oh, I should go and see whether or not students were able to identify any of their debt or not. Okay, so that's why it's there instead of leaving it blank. All right, first week of class, the faculty member said, all right, everybody, we're going to Rocket Money and we're all going to get a credit score. And if the students didn't have any debt and didn't have a credit score, and they were like, you know, Professor Z, I don't have a credit score yet, then as the data entry person, you would put in no identifiable credit score. Okay. Again, we put that in because we were having trouble with the last time with people just putting in other and putting in a 0. And then when the software calculated the credit score from 1 to 2, if somebody put in a 0 and then they put in, they went and got, then they finally got a credit score and it was like 500, it looked like the student increased their credit score by 500. When the reality was they really just didn't have a credit score the first time. So if they don't have a credit score, no identifiable credit score. But everybody in class went to Rocket Money, and if they did have a credit score, the student had a credit score of 540, and we can add it. Now, notice what happened. I put in the credit, I put in Rocket Money, I put in the score, and I hit add. I didn't say how the data was collected, okay? And this is throughout the database. This helps the evaluator to look and see if things were collected during a coaching session or during classroom. So this was a homework, this was an assignment the faculty member gave in class. So I should select in classroom and add it. And now it shows that in class, all the students went to Rocket Money and got a credit score. And here's what it is, and it's in the database. Okay, my job is done. As the data entry person, that was all I was asked to do. I wasn't asked to put in any financial goals because we don't know any financial goals yet. So I've got that. I know I've got it. That's everything's correct. So I scroll through to make sure it's correct. And now I go back to financial profile. And now you're going to see there's a version in here. And this is called the baseline version. Everything now works from here. From version to version to version, things carry forward so that you can see what was in the previous version. So when you open up and do the next version, you're going to see what was input in the previous version, okay? So that you can follow what's going on with that student, all right? So Juliet, I'm turning it back to you, and you're now going to add a new version as a coach.
So I'm sitting down with the student and I noticed that there's already data in the database because I just saw that there was a version 1 and this is my first meeting. And so I'm clicking on new version and the first question again is how is the financial data collected? So we know it's a coaching session, so we do that and click continue. And right away, the meeting date entry will pop up and you can click on the little calendar and record the date. And then of course, meeting location, in person or remote. Now again, created a personal budget. Let's just say that they have not created a personal budget so that we can keep it no. But if they did already, you can simply change that to yes. And then also, how was that budget created? Well, we sat down and we worked on it in the coaching session. And so you would click on coaching session. And then does the student receive income? Well, the data entry person did not know that, but the coach, after having these discussions with their student, does know that they have some kind of income. So you can change that to yes. And then you hit continue. And what you want to make sure is that you're going to update the information that you just changed at the top there. If you don't hit update, it won't save and it'll default back to the previous information that was first recorded. So now you know that the budget was created, it was in the coaching session, and they do have some kind of income. So we're going to start filling in that income information. So there's two sources here. We have something called non-wage income, and that's specifically income that is derived from external sources, such as scholarships or grants, etc. And if there's something on there that is not listed, there is an other button, and you can always fill in the notes section what that other form of external resource is. But in this case, we can say, let's just say they received a financial aid refund. And the amount could be anything you want, really. 500, we could say 500. And then you'll make sure you click add. You can add anything in the notes that better describes, perhaps when the refund arrived, from why, etc. Anything that helps define, anything that helps define more detail on this particular entry. And then you click add.
Now, this is not a required field, so you don't have to fill this in, but
Right.
if you want to, if you're going to have some conversations about budgeting, it's an important place to know that.
So the second is source of wages. For the wages, and this is going to be something along the lines of a job. It can be a work study, it can be self-employed, gig economy work, anything. Again, if it's something that is not listed, you can always click other. But in this case, let's say they do have a part-time job, and it could be whatever, walking a dog or cutting hair, and you can put in an amount as long as you designate if that $100 is per week, per month. You just want to be congruent if the student has more than one job, whatever dollar amount you put per week, you just want to make sure that everything's going to be congruent. And then you hit add. Okay? So far. And then as you can see, it totals to 100. If there had been a second job, perhaps they had a second job, like maybe a work study job, and that was $20 a week. And you can define where what that work study job was, and then you click add.
Some of these things they're there for notes for you to keep track of your students, and some of them are for notes for the evaluator when they go back to say, what was really happening in those coaching sessions? What kind of conversations were they having with students?
So there you can see how it totals. Again, just make sure that if it was $100 a week, that you're putting in the work study job also on a weekly basis. So again, these are not required fields, but if you're going to create a budget with your student, obviously income is an important component of a budget, especially if they have quite a bit of expenses and you're really working on helping them identify perhaps where they can cut back on expenses. So these two categories are going to be very helpful when you sit down and work with a budget and the student. Now we come to savings, which is a required metric. And the previous data that was entered was the person did not know if there was a savings account started, so they clearly started saying, they clearly put in savings not started. However, the student says to the coach, well, no, actually, I do have a savings account, and I have about $500 in it right now. And so you want to click on savings account, and then, of course, please select where the data collection.
Can I interrupt for a minute, Juliet? I just want to say something for the CCNY folks. I noticed when I looked at your data, you talked a lot about high yield savings accounts. So we're going to add that to this list because I know that you had done that with a lot of your students, talked about getting a high yield savings account. So we'll add that to that list. It'll be done probably by Friday. Okay.
Yeah, and if there's something else in there that is not listed, you can always click other and then add what that is in the notes.
So should I try to add this and not collect the data collected?
Sure.
There you go.
And then, of course, it's going to prompt you. Please select savings data collected. Where was it collected? And in this case, it was collected in the coaching session.
And then you could put in notes.
Now, the minute Darlene hits add, you'll see what happens.
Okay, ready? Watch the screen. Watch right here. I'm hitting add.
So that automatically removes the savings not started. And now the system knows that there is a savings account assigned with this student and they have $500 in it. Okay. This next section is investments. Now, investments, again, is not a required field, but it is a topic that many students and many coaches and instructors are going to be discussing most likely at some point. And we've had incidences where students want to learn about retirement savings. Sometimes students actually inherit a large sum of money. They don't want to put it in savings. They want to start saving for retirement. So this is a good area in which to discuss these products. And if you click on the Please Select, you can see a variety of products, IRAs. I mean, if it's a regular or Roth, you can actually put that in the notes. And let's just say for purposes of this student, they did open up an IRA. You can click on IRA and then you can put an amount, like, yeah, 1,000. And then it's useful to define whether it was a regular IRA or a Roth IRA, perhaps the date they opened it, anything that might be helpful to better identify when they worked on this investment. And then you click Add. And again, this is not a mandatory field, but it has been very useful in discussing retirement savings, etc., throughout these courses.
One of the faculty that at one of the other college spends a lot of time on retirement with his students because he feels that his students come from families that never had discussed this, and so this was something he requested that this be in here.
Yeah, the only thing I would caution is there are some students that, believe it or not, are very interested in investments in general. And they talk about crypto and they talk about, Coinbase as a platform and things like that. And if you are beginning to feel uncomfortable with some of these questions that they're asking with respect to financial advice, that's really when you need to tell them that your role is not a financial advisor. And that kind of information is better served when they talk to a brokerage account or a bank that has a registered representative. But just be wary of that because more and more students are, they're very interested in, the stock market and crypto and things of that nature. So it's just something to think about. And to, if you start feeling uncomfortable about that, that's when you need to perhaps give them another resource to talk to. Now, the debt is also a required metric. And as you can see, the previous entry was saying that, well, they didn't have any identifiable debt at the time. But now we know the coach has sat down with the student and they've spoken to them about what kind of debt they have. And in this case, they do have some credit card debt. And so there is a drop-down menu again, credit card, and you can put down the balance. It could be 1,000, whatever the balance might be. If they happen to know the interest payment and their monthly payment, that's great. It is not a mandatory field. And then you can put in what kind of credit card is it, how long, anything, how long has it been outstanding, anything that might help them understand, this credit card information. And then you're going to hit add for that. And you can put in as many debt options as possible. They might have personal loans, they might have student loan debt, they might have medical debt, as much as they can. And if it's not listed, you can always click Other, and then add in the notes section what other kind of debt they might have. And again, the question is asked, please select data collected. And in this case, it's the coaching session, and you click Add. And that is going to make the no identifiable debt entry disappear. So again, the system now recognizes that the student has a savings account, they have credit card debt, they have some income, they've created a budget. So you're really getting a sense now of the financial profile of the student, and it's becoming a real, a real live financial platform off of which the coach can really work with the student. The next category is credit score. And again, this is required for metrics. And let's just say that, yes, first day of class or the first week of class, some of these students did have their credit scores. So the data entry person did input this particular category. They put in the score of 540. So the student now knows their credit score. And at this point, let's just say it hasn't really changed since they sat down with the coach. But if it did, this is where well, maybe, Darlene, did you want to just walk you through that or on the next version?
Yeah, I'll do it in the next version.
Okay. So we'll show you what happens in the next version when we have a second credit score. And then finally, the financial goals. Now, this is going to be important because this is also a required metric, but this is really where the work begins in terms of spending time with the student and making sure that they are reaching their goals in terms of, for example, they might want to save for a down payment on a house. They might want to learn how to save $100 a week. So they need to be measurable goals. They need to be time bound, so effectively SMART goals. And this is where you start to see behavior change. So the more you actually sit down with your coach, the more students, and again, the minimum is 2 sessions. But if that student is really interested in trying to change the way they work with money and their competence in terms of feeling confident about money, that's where the behavior change will demonstrate itself, specifically in looking to reach these specific goals. And any time you have a goal, you have to put in a new entry. And so in this case, this is increasing savings by $50 a month. And again, the question is asked, please select data collected. Coaching session, and then you're going to click add. Now, if there's 2 or 3 other goals, you can continue to add goals. Now, at this point, where the question is achieved, it's going to say no, because we just added it as a goal. But once that goal is achieved, you can edit it and then change that to yes. And then the system will know that that goal has been achieved. Okay? Any questions on this particular page? So when you're finished and you're pretty comfortable that this has been reviewed and the student feels comfortable with the information they've provided, you click back to financial profile and that will automatically save the data. So now you're the coach and you see this particular page. You see now that there's 1 coaching session. And this is going to give you an idea of, great, this would be a good time to actually set up the next coaching session, because obviously the 2 minimum are required, but also make sure that you're working with the student in alignment with what they're being taught in class. They might ask you a lot more questions about what they learned in the course, but I think this is really where the coach can spend good time working with students expanding their knowledge, checking for understanding, and really helping them reach their goals in terms of what do you want to get out of this and where can I be, of most help to you.
Okay, so now the student's coming in for another coaching session, and I'm going to add a new version. And as Juliet says, what we hope and is, what one thing that we didn't see and we're going to continue to have discussions with all of you about is that coaching sessions aligning with what happens in the classroom. Okay, so we want to see that there's better communication between the faculty and the coach so that the coach knows what the faculty's been talking about when a student comes in. So now a student's coming back in to see me as the coach. So again, the data was collected in a coaching session. And we're going to continue. And again, it's going to ask me for the meeting date. And I'm just going to, and I met with the student in person. It's going to say it carried forward. They created a budget. Yes, the budget was created in the coaching session. We know the student has money, has a job. So we continue. And now we're going into the third session. This jumping, if you notice, it's jumped to the bottom of the page. They're in the process of fixing that. So it takes you back to the top of the page. Somehow a weird code got into the database to jump to the bottom. So they're working on fixing that. So again, it shows up on the top. And the data that was collected in the last session follows through. So you can see, you said the student told you they had a financial aid refund. They had these jobs that they had. And in the last coaching session, they said they had a savings account and that it was $500 when they started up. So it shows you that. If you had put in investments, it carries forward. So this is closer to the end of the set, let's say this is the middle of the semester and the faculty have been teaching and let's just say that the faculty have been teaching about credit and credit scores and understanding credit and credit cards as one of the lessons. So the student comes in to sit down with the coach and the first thing they say is, "Hey, Professor Jennifer, I'm so excited." Or they say to Leslie, the coach, "I'm so excited. I saved $50 last month in my savings account because I really want to open up that food truck. And I'm really excited to tell you that I added $50. You don't edit the savings account to be $550. What you do is you go in and you say, savings account. The student talked about this in a homework assignment and they added $50. Okay. All right. And then you add it. And notice what happens. It totals up to $550. Okay. This lets you as a coach watch the progression or faculty. If a faculty member is going in to look to see how their students are doing, you can see that they set that goal. They wanted to save $50 a month. And look, they saved that $50 a month. Okay. So investments. So that's how you add additional savings. You add it. You put in the amounts saved, not the total, but the amount saved from one session to the next. Okay. If you had put in $550, this would now calculate up to what? $1050. And that's not how much they have, right? So you add it. Debt runs a little differently. So, okay, so students have gone through in class, faculty have talked about credit cards, you've talked about APR, you've talked about minimum monthly payments, and the student comes back in and they come in with the coach and they say, I brought my credit card statement from last month because we talked about this in class. I actually made a payment to my credit card, but I now know how much interest and how much my minimum payments are because we did it in a classroom. So they know that they saved some money, that they subtracted $100. So they paid off that last month $100. So this time, instead of a plus, it's a minus 100. Okay, so they paid it off. They now know that their APR is 22.4%. Okay. And then they know that the minimum monthly payment, according to their credit card company, is $60 per month. And you could write in here, okay, faculty did a lesson on credit cards and talked with the students about minimum monthly payment and penalties. So that's a note to
Darlene?
yourself. Yeah. Yep.
Sydney's got a good question in the chat box.
Yeah, I see that. I was going to go back to it right when I finish this. Thank you. Got it. All right. Thank you. So I would try to add that, and I'd say this was in a classroom assignment, and it was in a class or group activity that they did that. And now it's added that to the debt. And it says it's minus $100 down to 1,100. And this is what the APR, and this is what the minimum payment is. Now, that 1,100, the student may say, well, wait a minute, my credit score says $1,122.46. That's a great place for you to be able to say, yes, you paid off $100 over that $1,200 amount that was due, but interest was accrued. And that's why your credit card statement says something than what, when you just added that, you took off that $100, your credit card says something else. So this gives the coach a really good chance to go back with what the faculty member taught about credit cards and debt and monthly payments and interest, to say to the student, yeah, you did make a $100 payment, but now look what your balance is, okay, based on what your minimum payment is and your interest rate is. And you could put some notes in, and you could change this and say credit card, and you could add that $22.18 and put in the notes, interest added because student did not make minimum payment, or did not make more than minimum payment, or student did not pay off debt. Okay. Yep. I always forget to add where it was collected. And now you'll see exactly what the student had. This, again, this is a great way for you to have a conversation with the student about the credit card and what's going on with their credit card and what's going on with their debt. You can put in multiple sources of debt. If the student had student loan debt, you could put that in. If they had medical debt, you could put that in. If they had auto payments, you could put those in as well. So you could put in multiple sources of debt for the students. And again, this helps when you're working with the students on their budget. It helps when you're working with the student about what's happening in class. Because then maybe now the faculty member is going to talk about different types of loans, or talking about federal student loans and when they're due and how you pay them and the difference between a student loan and a private loan. Okay, so this gives you a chance to put all of that in there. So Sydney asked a great question. What if they took that $100 out of their savings account to pay for that loan? You would go back up here to savings, and you would say savings account. We talked about this in the Highness session, and they took out that $100 to pay the loan. And you would put the notes here. Student took $100 out of their savings account, pay their debt. Now, these notes are not required. They're just a place for you to keep track of the conversations you have with your students. You don't have to put anything in. If you know exactly what's going on, you don't have to put anything in. But if you do know what's going on and you want to keep a note to remind yourself what happened when you talk to that student, put yourself a note in. Because now it says, now my savings account went down to $450 because I took it out to pay the debt.
I might also just add that the notes are really a nice window into what kind of behavior change might be going on with the student. Because through an evaluation, it's easy to see numbers, but it's also great to see how the transformation of that student has evolved over time. And we will only get that from notes. We will only get that from a description of how the coach has worked with the student. And I just think that could be very useful for purposes of understanding how the coaching process went.
Okay, so Sydney, I answered your question. Thanks for asking that. So then now we're later in the semester, and you said, well, let's go check your credit score again. So you can go in, and we want to remind you that it's always good to stay with the same reporting agency from session to session, because they do calculate it little differently. Probably all of you, my bank account gives me a FICO score, and one of my credit cards gives me a score, and sometimes they're off like 5 points because it's how they collect the data. So if they collected it for Rocket Money, it's always good to try to collect it at Rocket Money again. And this time you're sitting with them, it's a coaching session, and they look and they say 560, because they paid off some of their debt. And you add it, and now you're going to see that, wow, look, the student did make some progress in their credit score, because they did pay off some of their debt. And that's a great thing to have a conversation with the student. Say, hey, hooray, look what happened. Your credit score went up because you started paying off your credit card. The last piece is this financial goal. I remember we put this in at the last time that they wanted to increase their savings by $50 per month to save money to start a food truck business. They put that $50 in, and you want to say, aha, this is great. They achieved that goal. So if you want to, you go to edit, and you can now check achieved, and you hit save, and it shows that that goal was achieved. Okay? And then again, you save it by going back to the financial profile.
There's also an opportunity if the course has ended, but the student is they're really keen on making sure that they get that increase in credit score. They can always communicate what that change is to the coach or the instructor, or even after the course is ended, but before the end of the term. And that can be inputted so that would fulfill that requirement. So just keep that in mind, that you can still get that kind of information even after the course has ended with the student.
Yeah, and if as an instructor, you're collecting some data in class and you're going to you might put it in because you might want to be in the database, or you might have a data entry person put some data in. You can always go in and you can always put in data through another session. Okay, and you could compile up many, many different versions. What it does is it tracks from one version to the next, so you can see the progression and how your students are doing. Okay, any questions on that? I'm going to stop sharing and open up the floor to you to ask questions. All of this will make so much more sense once you jump into the database, and use it to help you keep track of what's going on with your students. It's how we run reports to see how you're doing as a college and how your program's doing. It's how your program administrator can run reports to see how you're doing as a college. And it's a great way for us to be able to see how this combination of teaching and coaching, the impacts that it has on students and on their financial behavior.
I guess I have a question.
Certainly.
So when it comes to trying to track or match what the instructor is covering in class and what the coach is seeing from the student, it would seem that there could be quite a bit of time. If a class meets weekly and you're trying to have 3 coaching sessions, so you might meet every month and a half or so. It just seems kind of difficult to me to see how you can kind of like match that up or something. So in your metric collection data thing, so is there a different way to match that? I got the impression based on the example that it was like, okay, yeah, so the instructor talked about credit report. And so we can look at, the savings, the increase in savings and or the reduction in the debt, and we could do the credit report and we could see that maybe the credit score went up. So, you know what I mean? So there was a correlation between the instructor talking about the credit, but that might not happen. It may not happen that way. You know what I mean? I guess it just seems kind of, I'm wondering whether there's a more global way to assess the students achieving the overall kind of like goals of what's being taught in class. I don't know. It's maybe I should think about it before a little more before I ask a question, but it just seems kind of difficult. I don't know.
I mean, Sydney, it's a great question, and it's why we're hoping that the faculty and the coach start to have more communication. We're also hoping that when we do the monthly calls with your teams, that the coach comes to some of the monthly calls so that they can be aware of what's going on as well. It really is all about communication. And it's really great that if the coach knows the syllabi and knows what's happening each week with the students, that they're going to know, okay, during this, and they could say to the student, hey, I saw this week that you were talking about credit cards. Do you want to talk about your credit card debt today? Or I saw this week that the coach was talking about, paying off your student loans and what does it mean to have a private loan versus a federal loan. So it's great for you to be able to have that, to be tracking what's going on in the classroom and for you to have those conversations back and forth with each other. And we really would like to see you have those conversations. And again, hoping that the coaches start to come to some of the technical assistance monthly calls. Does that help?
Well, I guess yes and no, right? So based on my coaching experience last semester, I found that a lot of the students' financial goals were more global per se. Like, someone said, okay, I want to save for a down payment for a house, or I want to, the goals were kind of like more global. And I guess what I tried to do was present them with options to achieve their overall global goal as opposed to saying, okay, we talked about credit cards this week. And so, are you making timely payments on the credit card? That would be, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, let me think about it for a bit and let me talk with the instructor of the class. And like you said, we could communicate more and try to make sure that my approach in coaching kind of like mirrors what they are expecting to achieve in going over the curriculum of the program. Sorry.
That's
And
okay.
Sydney, also, you can, the students can have short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals, right? So it's even helpful to say, well, think about a short-term goal. Think about like, okay, so you want to get that savings to buy a car or a down payment on a house, but what do you need to do short-term to get there? And that can be an achievable short-term goal that might be available to do within the time frame of the class, right? And then you know that that goal could be achieved. So it might be useful to talk to your students about short-term goals, medium-term or long-term, and they can try and achieve all those, but with the short-term goals as a first step.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't mean to be hogging the conversation. This is just very, I was really kind of like surprised at how many students were like got really involved in this, right? And so my approach to the whole coaching thing was give me your budget, right? Let's do your budget, right? Which is a requirement, but the budget became the focus of everything we did. The credit card stuff, that was, yeah, we need to do that stuff, but let's look at your budget. And we took the budget and we broke it out into, okay, here are discretionary items, here are non-discretionary items. So let's look at your goals. You want to save more money. Okay, well, you're kind of like spending too much now. Where can you cut? Okay, you have these discretionary items that you can play with. The non-discretionary, you can't really play with. So it was the budget that became the focus of how we tried to help them achieve their goals or focus on their goals, as opposed to, looking at your credit cards or whatever. But
All right, Sydney, that's a great question, and I think that you should sit down and have that conversation with Juliet and Crystal and Dr. Z at the same time and talk about that because you're right, the budget really does drive a lot of that stuff. Karen, you had a question.
I think Sydney, in some ways, was getting to what my questions were. First of all, the tool does help to bring it all together for me in a particular way. So thank you for the training. Um, I think that as we communicate what I already know will be a successful effort, I want to be able to sort of aggregate data and present
Mhm,
it publicly. And
mhm.
I'm just thinking a little bit ahead, but Sydney, in your question and answers to Sydney, is just giving me some sort of ideas for presentation and how we can um, do some things on our end. So I don't really have a question. Thank you for the question, Sydney.
And you will have access to reports that will help you do that. You'll,
Oh, you know what? Thank you for that. So um, maybe I can ask in terms of how long the information lives the data lives in the system, because I do think for us to get a very clear picture of changed behavior, right?
mhm,
There's goal setting, yes, but there's changed behavior that the student may actually want to refer back to
mhm.
that may drive other kind of best practices at the college. So how long does the information live in the system?
Well, right now it's living in there until the whole project ends. And if you're gonna, you could go back and look at students by terms by doing a search. So you could go back and look at a student by a term and see the difference. Um, and the reports run over the term. Um, but if you wanted to go back further, we could talk about that. Right now, we don't have reports written to do that. We just have reports written to do over the course of a term. But we could talk about that. The evaluator does, one of the things that the evaluator does is uh, he and Mary go in and they do some looking at your institution in terms of retention. And does this have a impact on retention? Are students more likely to be retained at the college and more likely to persist and complete because they feel financially well? And you'll see that data at the end of we do it at the end of every year, Crystal. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Still trying to figure that out if we want to do it fall to fall, because that's really the proper definition, but we're waiting to hear from our evaluator to decide if he wants to also do some spring to falls or fall to spring.
Okay. Well, I know our IR person will definitely be interested in pull and even taking some of that qualitative data from the note section and categorizing it. So thank you for that.
And yeah, one of the things you will be able to do and I think right now we have you listed as the administrator, is that you will be able to get your college's raw data. Okay. Dr. Z. Wait,
Yes,
there you are.
thank you. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Could you go back to some slides that were detailing what creates a new version for a student's financial profile? I want to get some clarification on what actions in the database create a new version, which ones don't.
So creating a new version, you just add a version?
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure, because that might
Right.
erase my question. Add a version. Okay, yeah. So in general, it looks like a typical pattern, although there are always exceptions, might be students enter some of their own data to create a version one, and then subsequent meetings create new versions. Does that seem like a
Well,
general pattern?
Students
we
never put
expect?
it, students never put financial information in. This is only put in by the coach, the faculty, or the data entry person. But students
Okay,
could
maybe I
come,
should say it another way. So
yeah,
version 1 on this slide has data collected as other
yep,
that might not have been from a coaching session,
right,
right? Okay. So maybe not student directly, but if the student puts it up on our learning management system and we just draw from that,
right,
that would be what you would call a
right,
non-coaching session.
yeah,
Okay.
correct. So, yeah, if you did something in class, like you did something in class and you had every student in class work in teams to do something. I don't know, go online and look up credit cards and something. You could put that in as an other section, an other, and not a coaching session. And so the data
I
that was
see.
collected during that could go in as another.
So I guess maybe then I have a suggestion slash question, which is to try to make it consistent how people using the database create new versions. So if every time I get any new piece of data on a student, whether it be through coaching or not, I'm creating new versions, and another school is saying, well, we're only going to have 3 versions, the first, second, and third meeting, that might make it hard to compare.
The database compares from version to version when it does the calculations. It doesn't necessarily, um, it doesn't necessarily measure, it doesn't go against how many versions are there. When you're looking at increases in scores or decreases in scores, it looks across the versions. So it, every college will do it differently. Um, every college may only put in data for a coach may only put in data, or a college may only have a data entry person putting in certain data. So we got to make sure we have enough flexibility for the different colleges, particularly as we add more and more colleges.
Okay, so it wouldn't be a problem on your end though for a school to say, we're going to do monthly versions. We're going to
Yeah,
do versions for coaching sessions. We're going to do weekly versions.
yep,
Got it. Thank you.
certainly. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? All right, you will be contacted by Juliet about getting access into the database and about getting the information so your students can register when your semester starts. And we're hoping that we continue to have these conversations that you continue having these conversations during your technical assistance monthly calls. Um, and if there's questions, bring them up then. If you have a problem with the database, work with Juliet and she will help you resolve that issue. If it's a database problem or if it's just a user operator error, which as you saw, every time I added a student, I forgot to input something and I kept getting that little red thing coming up telling me, don't forget to put that information in there. So I have lots of operator errors when I'm using the database, even though I've been playing with it now for a few months. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for being here. Thank you for your time, and we're looking forward to your next semester and to see the good work that you're continuing to do with your students. So take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night. Oh, goodbye.
It's good morning for me still. Bye-bye, everyone.